Yeah, I want to get into like actually what is a main question out there by males. They'll say, "What really turns a woman on?" And you see all these websites out there. How to attract women. What could make a woman yours? What can turn her on? What can make her so hot she has to have you and all this. And I know a lot of times they are looking for money, the websites, and that's what I'm going to tell you on this deal is going to be no cost to you, really. It's not going to be anything. It's not because I'm not selling anything. And I know a lot of times males think what turns a woman on is money, but that is definitely incorrect. It's somewhat true in a roundabout way, but it's definitely not money specifically. Because, with all relationships, there's always like a lot of people jumping through hoops to try to find, the best partner, the best relationship. And sometimes they think they have the best one, and they find after they broke up, there's a better one that comes along, and then, that type of thing. But, with all relationships, there's always this interconnection no matter what, even if, you never met the person. Because, a lot of times, they try to force things. Guys will try to force things, or even women will try to force things through appearance, or maybe through supplementation of funny little pills and things like that, to make something come about that is actually not your natural best partner. And, that's actually the problem with society today, because, they almost push this where they say that, doing this or getting drunk, getting high, whatever the heck it is, you just have fun. But it's like it's such a temporary thing. It's such a temporary thing, because that would not necessarily be your best partner. That's pretty obvious, but, it's been pushed that way. But I'm going to actually state some natural things that can actually change the libido of your partner. And they do work. They do work. They're nothing that really cost any money, and you'll be surprised at what they are. Now, a lot of times with people, when they meet a person that's right for them, they really think that's the person they knew all their life. It's like the guy will be saying here, I think I'd miss you even if we never met, right? And it's as if, you knew this person before you knew the person. Because, I put this out before, but actually our DNA is all like light and energy. It's a transmitter and it's a receptive antenna. We are all interconnected in a lot of ways, and even especially even with family members, not to say, family members are going to be your lifelong partner, but I'm saying is even with family members, to give an example, that you would sometimes have a feeling that you knew something happened good or bad to that family member, even if they were on the other side of the world. And as you become lifelong partners with somebody, you seem to have that interconnectivity that happens to you after a while, because you can sense what's going on. You can always tell a lie and all that type of stuff. So, it seems to be that everything gets wrapped around the brain, just like the little hands here. Now, I want to get into some things because, a lot of times people go into a lot of little different games, and it's almost like you're playing a Ouija board. How do we get to, the guys like say, how do we get to base 1? How do we get to base 2? How to base 3? That's what he's thinking. And, that's a natural progression of things because, the sexual drive is very strong. That's why there's a lot of people on this earth, and it's deliberately that strong for basically survival, survival of the human race, Now, I know the Illuminati are trying to freaking change that, but, the hell with them. We're not going to talk about those guys. But anyway, the other thing is, sometimes what puts a damper on relationships is when the male actually says, he has to have total ownership of the female, and that really is not what you really want. So, it's almost like you have to have this mind connection and just let it go with the flow. But just going back to some of the oldest things out there, like increasing dopamine, can boost, actually it does boost female sexual pleasure quite a bit. Dopamine and serotonin are related, but one cancels out the other, believe it or not. They work together in a balance. Now, going back to some of the oldest things out there, dark chocolate-covered strawberries, increases dopamine levels, the brain's pleasure chemical. And also the bioflavonoids in dark chocolate also open up blood vessels and improve blood flow in both, sexes. And, another thing is, a lot of men are very visual. It's like what they look at is what turns them on. What women love is actually what they hear and actually smell. So sometimes the right, as a male knows this, the right music. But, we should look at also 432 hertz. 432 hertz, if you're unaware of that, because most music today is actually put into the 440 hertz, which is not the natural rhythm of things. Now, I also want to get into a couple things where we're talking about with the foods, because we talked about the chocolate-covered strawberries. But, you'd be interested to know that actually sometimes, it even works for this guy, fire up the spiff. What even works, though, is bananas. Bananas is a dopamine increaser, like almonds, bananas, some of the lean dairy products, avocado. And, a lot of times people don't realize it because as they're walking through this wasteland, they're not looking at some of the most obvious things. So sometimes maybe your female partner is a little bit like less libido than you would like her to be, or she's grown that way after a period of time. Some of the things that can actually increase it is the simple banana. Now, you'd be looking at the banana and you say, yeah, I know what that reminds me of, because of the shape. But, the banana, to give you another interesting point, the big conglomerate and retail store, Walmart, you know what their number one selling item was a couple years ago? The banana. The banana. So, maybe people know that it's actually increasing your dopamine, and maybe that's why they are eating bananas, because of the libido, which will work on anybody. Now, another thing you can actually take in the form of pills, and it's very safe. It's not an artificial pill. It's actually a protein. It's L-Tyrosine. L-Tyrosine actually has been known as a precursor for dopamine, and it works almost like a shot of coffee. Even the military even said, hey, we're going to give this L-Tyrosine to our soldiers because it makes them more alert. They're experimenting with it too. So, it's almost like you could play all these different types of simpler mind games without actually getting into the, the hardcore stuff, because some of the things that are precursors for dopamine are very powerful. Now, another thing you could probably do is some of the frequencies by scalar remote. Like 38 frequency is actually something that helps in the production of dopamine. But you also want to be careful not to raise the serotonin, because serotonin, so the 38 is not going to raise serotonin. Frequency 10 will raise serotonin. But serotonin will actually cancel out the effects of dopamine. Actually, they try to raise serotonin in people that have been sex offenders and things like that to lower their sexual drive. And what happens is during orgasm, the dopamine, which is the thing that's actually bringing about the sex drive at the time of orgasm, what happens is there's a major serotonin release, and it starts canceling out the dopamine and brings down the high. So that's what happens. So to initiate things, you want to actually take any types of foods without watching for the calories. One of the things I said I would recommend too, what is the L-Tyrosine? It's just a simple. You can get that anywhere. I'm not marketing it or anything. It's just, you can find this anywhere. Any kind of health food stores, you can go online and buy L-Tyrosine. And what it does, though, it raises your dopamine. But, what's cool about it, too, is it'll actually raise your mental alertness. And it almost works like a cup of coffee without having a coffee or without having a caffeine. So that's a pretty cool natural high. But it will raise your dopamine levels quite a bit. And as after the climax, what happens is that there's a gush of release of serotonin, and what happens is that's where you really brings down the dopamine. You have that feel-good rush. So it's a balance between serotonin and dopamine. Now, serotonin, it's kind of cool to have because it actually suppresses the libido, and it does actually suppress the libido, but it's actually the feel-good hormone, so a lot of times people like that. But, feeling good, and, sometimes if a person is interested in more in sex and trying to get their partner to be more, aroused, you do not want to raise the serotonin because it will cancel out the dopamine. It'll cancel out the dopamine. So, I just want to point out, though, I guess, sometimes maybe people kind of do know this in some ways, because just looking at the number one seller in Walmart a couple years ago, the banana is one of the foods that will actually raise your dopamine levels. and besides potassium and things like that. So there's a lot of natural ways to do it without spending a lot of money or getting involved in funny little pills. So there's a lot of natural ways of doing it. So just want to point this out. And there's other things you could do too. Not that I sell these devices or anything like that, but you actually have the beta brain tutors. There's different various brands out there. Now, you would not be using something like a regular Rife machine, but they actually have electronic devices that will actually balance and tune the brain. So if a person feels like, I don't know why my libido is down, maybe the woman's almost complaining about it herself because she just doesn't feel like, this way or that way. Actually, some of the brain tuners that are out there, and they're not something like it's going to change the way you think or alter your brain so much, but what it does is it puts things in balance. So if your dopamine is too low or your serotonin is too low or whatever, it puts things in balance. And actually, those brain tuners are very useful because if people actually have problems with addictive drugs, they've been known to help people kick the bad habits. And if you have bad habits that are kind of holding on to you with having abusive drugs and things like that, a lot of the times those things will actually go a long way to heal you and give you the willpower to do whatever you need to do on your own and just be natural. So anyway, I just figured I'd pass on this tip because, it's almost like dopamine is the key, and, to raising sexual arousal, but it's not actually the long-term key, but, you don't need the long-term key. I guess there's highs and lows. And actually, after the orgasm is achieved, what happens is there's a rush of serotonin, and it cancels out the dopamine. But also, males need to understand that women are totally will perceive things very much. I know males are very, very visual, and I know women look at that, and they're aware of that because of styles and makeup and everything to attract the male they want, because they realize that males are very visual, but women love to hear things. They love to hear things because, that is often why sometimes males are perplexed by, why does a woman listen to that guy when, what he's saying doesn't seem to really make sense to me, but it could be the way he's saying it. Because the tone of voice has everything in the world to do with the receptivity of the woman. So women love to hear things, but they don't love to hear bullshit too. They're not that stupid. So any of you males trying to throw a little bullshit out there, it's not going to work in the long run. So, it's a matter of finding your best spiritual partner, and your best spiritual partner is different for everybody. It's different for everybody. It's no use going through all the games. It's not really worth it going through all the games and trying to force the issue, because it's a matter of just making the right connection. And, it would be nice if we could actually dial in and find out exactly who that is. I know they always have these computer websites out there to do that type of stuff, but, 99% of the time they're total bullshit, you know what I mean? But in certain cases, you just know it. You just know it. You could just tell. But, when you find that out, you're never going to be in possession of her. It's just to be a matter of you're actually making a spiritual mind connection. And, it's going to happen one way or the other, because the most unexpected things always do happen. So it's almost like you never want to force the issue. But I just want to bring this out, this video out, because a lot of times people are in relationships for a long time, and the male complains that the woman no longer has the libido. But the secret to the libido is actually to raise the dopamine levels. And, like I said, Walmart's #1 food for a couple years ago was the banana. A good food for raising dopamine levels, and a very simple supplement out there is called L-Tyrosine. And you can also do that with frequencies like 38, but I'm not going to get into that subject because it's a little more complicated than that, because what you do is you raise the dopamine levels and then you produce it and then you have to release it. There's like a whole frequency set out there, but there's a lot of different ways you could do this without getting involved with a lot of money. So anyway, I just figured I'd pass on some of these tips. I thought they'd be useful to a lot of people.